G'day world, Chris Hogan coming to you for the Proactive Podcast, episode 124. And I have with me today Dr. Simon Tannock, who is the co-founder and director of Algae Enviro, with a master's degree in biotechnology of Diatom, algae cultivation, and a PhD in wastewater treatment. Simon is well-versed in algae and wastewater processes. Algae Enviro manufactures several products that work together to change water quality from poor to very high. The technology reduces nutrient levels and increases biodiversity within the water and the surrounding environment by creating the conditions to allow water to heal itself is the best option. There's no need for glyphosate or other herbicides or toxic chemicals. The Algae Enviro system is rebalancing the water chemistry so that nature can take over and remove polluting nutrients, get rid of toxic blue algae, and remove large water weeds that choke the waterway. Thank you so much for joining me today, Simon.
No worries. Nice to be here. Thanks.
Mate, it was actually, I think, your title and your description that just made me want to reconnect with you. I know it was several years ago that we connected at a Myriad conference, and
Yes.
Mate, and then you led me to a beautiful new video that you created, which really explained quite well what it is you do. But I just had to get you on because, I mean, you're a man of true purpose who's really out there to, I guess, change the world, one freshwater lake or pond at a time, I guess.
Yeah, but we will include marine environments in there as well. We're not just freshwater. So we'll take on the sea if we're given the contract.
Awesome. So I mean, that description, I mean, I've read it a few times now. Can you
and
explain?
stayed awake, which is awesome.
Thank you. Can you tell me and tell the audience, I guess, what is this diatom algae and how is it going to naturally repair the waterways?
Sure. Can I be a little bit nerdy? I would say diatom rather than diatom.
Sorry.
It's the way I've grown up and how most people I know say it. There are a few that do diatoms, but it just sounds wrong to me. It upsets my chakras. So our product is just a micronutrient fertilizer, which will feed diatom algae. So we don't actually make or grow diatoms within our system. We use the micronutrients to ensure that the diatom algae that are naturally in a waterway, in a lake, a dam, a river, in the sea, get the right food to grow. And I guess the issue or the problem is that we pollute a lot of areas with too much nitrogen and too much phosphorus. And just like you and I, diatoms need a good, healthy, balanced diet. They can't live on just nitrogen and just phosphorus. They need a bunch of other things as well. So if the water has a certain amount of micronutrients and then they get starved of those, they won't grow anymore. And that's when weeds and blue-green algae, which many of their species can be toxic, they can kill dogs, they can cause illness in humans. There are now links to motor neuron diseases due to some of the toxins that are present or produced by these blue-green algae. So they're quite a concern. So if we can ensure that every morning when a diatom wakes up, there's the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and everything else they need, then they'll be able to keep growing. The reason that's a cool idea to assist them with that is, one, they grow faster than lots of other algae and weeds and blue-green algae. Two, they are very good at improving water quality with extra oxygen and things like that. And three, rather than just growing lots and lots and lots of diatoms and swapping your hideous blue-green algae bloom with a hideous diatom bloom, their diatoms generally fill up the base of the food chain. So whilst they're growing rapidly, lots of other animals are waking up in the morning and going, well, that diatom is my breakfast. you know, thanks for that, and then they eat them. So now we're doing a big change of the conditions that doesn't normally happen. We're now moving nitrogen and phosphate pollution into diatoms, into microinvertebrates and zooplankton and snails and larvae, into the next layer of bigger ones and bigger until we end up growing more birds, more fish, more eels, more turtles in the ecosystem with less pollution. So we're moving all that pollution into happiness and nature, which is where we would want it to be.
Fantastic. I'm sure I'm not alone in becoming a climate change activist, and I can thank David Attenborough for educating me on this. His latest documentary on Netflix really enlightened me. I've watched it 3 times and taken notes. It was amazing to me that basically his eyewitness statement said things like, we need to rewild the world and bring back biodiversity and get rid of monocultures. So what I understand, your sorry, what's the name of the product again?
Diatomics, which is
Beautiful.
Simply, it's a mix for diatoms. So we just blended them.
Beautiful. So what I understand diatomics to do is actually almost rewild the water, bring back biodiversity. And I think, lending some insights from David Attenborough, that is super important in helping us manage, I guess, the increased carbon and that we're producing, and of course the pollutants that we're producing. You being a scientist would have known this well before me. Is this what you're doing? Is this actually going to help us with climate change on a micro level?
Oh, that's going to take some unpacking, and I'm going to try not to nerd out. So it depends on which system we're dealing with, I suppose. In that, climate change being increased CO2 from fossil fuels is a big one, and that's where and I'd probably get all sorts of arguments if I said this in an industry or scientific, audience. But if we address the nutrient levels in the sea and tried to increase diatom growth long term in a very steady way, then there is some evidence and some research that says yes, you might be able to, because diatoms are generally heavier than water. So as they die, they sink, and then some of that has been shown to go into the greater depths. Equally, I think generally that idea has been abandoned because people are saying, well, it just doesn't happen. But I don't necessarily think that that's been investigated enough. Like, they've done experiments with iron and said we threw iron into the sea, we saw a big algae bloom, but it didn't necessarily create the changes that we wanted. Equally, I would push back and say, well, you didn't necessarily get only diatoms to grow. There were green algae and all sorts of other colors and types of algae to grow, and not all of those are heavy and sink. So maybe you needed to control that. And because our technology is specific to diatoms, like the way we've done it, those micronutrients are only bioavailable to diatom algae, we can control what types of algae grow. So possibly a broad answer would be yes, if we did some more work, we could understand that it would work. But from a micro perspective of saying, can we improve this water body, then, and I'm thinking on the run here, I guess the answer to some degree is still yes, because if we can increase the dissolved oxygen in water, we're not releasing as much methane, because we're having the methane convert across, or the conditions aren't suitable for methane to be made. The carbon is turned into CO2, which is used by diatoms and other algae, which is then eaten by animals. So the emissions coming off set wastewater treatment plants could be reduced, and then we're on that win. Equally, whilst other people are doing more about carbon release, the fact that we could be improving, reducing nutrient pollution, going to the sea, which is causing these massive dead patches in the sea, and massive algae blooms, which are also causing all sorts of other biodiversity issues within the sea. So if we can do a lot of those steps, the environment, biological environment, is healthier and able to manage this more. Equally, if we can get more plants nearby to waterways to be growing better, then they can take up more carbon, and that will do it. So, as I said, there's a lot to unpack, and I've only just touched on where we could go with that conversation.
No, I really appreciate that. And look, I threw you in the deep end.
Yeah, absolutely did. Thank you for that.
I love it. Thank you. I wouldn't ask smart people hard questions if I didn't think you could answer them. So basically, the other problem that I saw in my research was that, and David Attenborough's film, was that, by reducing the large animals, especially sea animals, large fish, overfishing stocks, we've created a problem as well. We've reduced the biodiversity of the oceans, and so what I understand from what you've said is that by increasing the biodiversity in our waterways, we're actually encouraging more, wildlife, and therefore, it's all part of the food chain, right? So if we fix it at this end, that flows out. All rivers flow to the ocean, and therefore there's more food out there for those animals, and therefore there's potential for greater survival rates of larger fish and larger sea animals. So that's how I understand also your product to be benefiting, the environment and potentially combating climate change. So am I correct in that kind of assumption too? That sort of,
again, in really broad, let's not bog ourselves down in the specific. Yes, I'm very comfortable with that statement. There will always be a reason or a way or an opinion that says, no, I don't like what Chris has just said. But as a holistic, without boring the ass off the audience, yes.
Yeah. Fantastic.
I think that's a fair statement, and I come back to if we can have biodiversity and a healthy environment that's not overly polluted with the nutrients and things like that, and it's in balance, then it's far more able to do its ecological services than it not. Like wetlands, for example, are very good at soaking up nutrients and doing all of those things, but wetlands are so many different habitats doing so many different things, from breaking down organic matter all the way to being a fish nursery. And there's gazillions of little layers in between all of those. If it's sick due to massive amounts of nitrogen coming in with a scumming algae layer which isn't letting any light down, it's of no use to anyone. So just making the environments healthy and letting them do their thing, we're already on a win, which is biodiversity.
Fantastic. So what values did you portray to even want to have, I guess, this as your purpose? Like, how did you, or when did you get started, and in even this journey of creating Algae Enviro and Diatomics?
I started off, I've always been a biology science type person. From when I was 4 or 5 years old, Mum and Dad used to struggle to get me off the beach or out of the rock pools and things like that to come home. Into my university years, I initially wanted to be a forensic scientist, but decided that there's too much lab nitty gritty for who I am. And then I did master's degree through my work at the time in an aquaculture company in Diatom algae, and discovered how awesome they are. And then at that point, I actually decided I wanted a bit of a break, and I would take a left hand down Artist Street and move my family, or my son and my wife, to Australia from New Zealand, and studied opera at the Griffith Conservatorium in Brisbane. And it was through that, which was a wonderful experience, and I greatly enjoyed it. And I was really learning a lot about singing and things like that. But nearing the first year, I had sort of two realizations. One, I was becoming intellectually bored because there weren't challenging science questions in my face on a regular basis. And secondly, whilst we absolutely need art to, fulfill our lives, I was never going to be one of the top 10 singers. I was going to be a good singer who would get a few jobs probably, but not amazing. But I didn't want my grandchildren to ask, Gramps, what were you doing when climate change was happening? I didn't want the answer to be singing songs. So I left and I went and did a PhD to do my bit to, save us from the current trajectory.
That's amazing. I'm sorry I interrupted there with a cackle.
That's all right.
No, that's a good motivation.
It is. And look, I love what I do. My work is not a job because I love what I do. I get up in the morning and think, right, I've got a number of research trials. We're doing trials in soil at the moment. We're doing trials with a new product in a couple of different water bodies. Plus, obviously, we're contacting people and trying to make sales because we've got to live by selling products and changing waterways and stuff. But I love what I do. And there's always a bit of my brain ticking away going, what's next, or how do I make it better, or what can we do, or what problem waters that we can't currently solve can we fix? And that's what this new product is, where I believe it'll be substantially better for a number of areas where we struggle based on the water chemistry of different sites.
Now, you said that was 4 to 5 years old that you discovered a passion for this. Was there somebody in your life at that time that I guess inspired you? Or
no, not really. My dad is an aeronautical engineer, so he certainly created the questioning in me, and also in the fact that he travelled, overseas a few times a year for his job. He also managed to come back with, the latest Lego set. So the inventors of Lego can take claim, because that created that innovation, invention, wanting to build with my hands part of my brain. But no, science, just life and what was out there, and lifting rocks and looking for slaters and worms, and they were also my guide. And what's strange and small and yucky for some is awesome to me.
Yeah, great. Would you say some of the value sets of your father, are similar to what you hold dear today?
Yeah, integrity and honesty are major for him, which are also very important for me. But it's along the way, I've had a few like biology teachers and things like that, and the tramping club and stuff, where we respect the environment and we just learn from it and things like that. So yeah.
Great. And who would you say your heroes are today that inspire you? Celebrity heroes, maybe?
Yeah, no. See, I'm not big on celebrities being to be revered. People who are doing good in the environment and doing their very early on, I thought Google was great because their driving seemed to be about doing no harm or doing great things. I think they've become a money machine now, but back then I liked that they were trying to to bring knowledge to people, and that was the initial drive, or that's what I took as their message. David Attenborough, certainly. David Bellamy. Yeah, David Bellamy. And then I guess there aren't really Neil deGrasse Tyson and a lot of those scientists who are bringing science to the people. But certainly in algae world, there's no key algae person that's of note that sort of drives me.
Well, you certainly can be the hero of your own story then on that regard. So well done. Well done.
Yes.
Mate, and what would, have you articulated your purpose at all? Like life purpose or even business purpose at all? Have you?
Probably not. I mean, when we started Algae Enviro, we developed the technology. We were aware of some other technology that was similar. We sort of blended, reached out to them, tried to work with them, developed an understanding that they really didn't know what they were talking about. And it was frustrating to try and work with them. So we moved on and then just thought, this is going to be a little bit of pocket money whilst I'm working as a consultant in algae as well, and algae production, because at the time the biofuels from algae thing was really starting to kick off, and I was picking up quite a bit of work for design and consulting in that area. And quite early on, we had some really major wins on some pretty toxic sites, and word of mouth just kept coming, and we'd go, we had one client who presented us as one of the cheapest chemicals we buy and probably one of the most effective. And that's very nice coming from industry, said in an industry forum that makes people pay attention. So that we kind of ended up just having to put any consulting to the side, because Algae Enviro just kept growing and growing. And then we realized things like, one of our clients said, we love the product, we love it, everything it did, but to send somebody down 3 times a week to dose the product is really annoying and it takes too much time. And I said, we've got a dosing machine that will do it automatically every day. And they said, well, send us a quote for that. And we walked out of the meeting and my business partner said, we've got a dosing machine? And I said, we will by Monday.
Beautiful.
And so it was just a matter of figuring, what's it going to cost and how are we going to put it together and what's it going to be made of. But that's been that, and that unit has sort of developed, and now we have floating ones as well. And we also have another product which helps to bring greater biodiversity to a site that is a very engineered, basically, tank, and biology doesn't love it. We have what we call a biofilm floating habitat, which is a bit like submerging a coral reef, although it's not made of coral, but an area where life can go in and live in what is otherwise just a tank of water, so as to allow the biology to come in and land safely, lay eggs, grow, breed, and create all these biological outcomes that we want in what is otherwise a very inhospitable environment.
Fantastic. And so what excites you now about the work that you do?
Well, right now, as I mentioned, the new product that we're developing, it has me very excited because we are just on that very early part of that journey. But the work we've done so far, it would appear to reduce not only the blue-green algae count, but also the suspended algae count, which for companies, particularly raw water and drinking water suppliers, they don't want suspended algae and other things blocking up their filters. So if we can treat their water to fantastic quality whilst not blocking their filters, they're going to be very excited by that. Aquaculture, we've done some trials, but their water generally is very low in silica, which is something that diatoms need. And we've developed this new product also brings its own silica on the journey, so you don't need to supplement, which means that from the work we've done already and the modeling, we think that we can improve like shrimp productivity with a 4-to-1 return on investment, by increased number of animals at the farm gate. So if they're spending $4,000 of product and getting $20,000 more prawns at the end of the season, happy days. So those are the things that that excite me, and I'm sure once this settles down and we have a better understanding, then something in the back will go, oh, what about this? And I'll be off again.
Fantastic. So you're an inventor.
Yes.
Really, you're an inventor. And I'm amazed by people like you to be able to invent actual products that benefit people in the way that yours does, and you're solving a huge problem.
It really, it's there are, in engineering and science, but particularly in engineering, they have things called wicked problems, which are those ones that are so widespread or so seemingly unfixable that people they call wicked problems because we just don't know how we could fix them. Climate change isn't one of those, because we know the problem, we have all the technologies for the solution. It's just the political and very high sort of, and I might be wrong in this, but this is my take on it, the very, very rich, a lot of which has come from fossil fuel money, in some way have just sold their soul and their love of human beings and swapped it for the love of a dollar. And there have been so many people and papers and models that show that if we just went, right, climate change, we're going to nail carbon by 2030, we could do it. Look what we did with coronavirus. Not every country, but certainly Australia, certainly New Zealand. If you want to address a major problem, you can do it. And coronavirus is actually a lovely little model of climate change. We knew that what was causing it, we knew what the solutions were, we created it, and we stopped the whole world and said, behave, this is how we're going to do it. And what reason not to do that with climate change, other than there's a few people with a bunch of money and political will who just don't want to do that.
Yeah, well, the people have spoken, mate, and it's the return of the 1960s sentiment, power to the people, where they are actually voting with their wallets and saying, well, you know what, we're changing the world on our own. If the government won't do it, we will. And be honest, it's not really the governments of the world who are responsible for societal problems, solving societal problems. It's actually it's
politicians
society.
Follow to where the votes are.
Society solve the problem.
I whilst I think that politicians allow certain companies to feed their desire for more oil and more plastic and things like that, it's simply going to be a matter of, as you say, the people just have to say no more single-use plastics, and we're going to support these people who come up with these cool ideas for more glass, more metal, more paper, compostables, etc., and just support them and realize that if we don't, we're in.
Well, there's some wicked problems worth solving. Simon, how do people stay across the work that you're doing and maybe even help you, make this change in the world happen faster?
There's an internal wicked problem. We don't have a huge social media presence simply because we are busy doing what we do. The majority, we actually, I've got a friend down in Brisbane who went to San Fran and did the big social media thing and decided that maybe the States and all of that wasn't for him, but he's got a very successful social media company in Brisbane. And he said, I've put many clients onto him, and he said, I want to return the favor let's, give you a present. And so he did a whole lot of reviews and looked at it, and he said, people just aren't looking for wastewater, treatment solutions on Facebook or on Twitter. So we don't see there's a major point for us to push our social media presence in that way. We do now do a garden pond product, simply because we got asked so often. We're like, well, we're just going to have to do it because the demand is there. So, that in that way. But I guess because we are basically working with councils and utilities, aquaculture, I'd be happy to be given a solution, but I don't know that there's a power of the people or social media way to push for getting more awareness, from people to make those companies aware. Maybe there is. I guess it would be as, for example, where there's a blue-green algal bloom in an environment and people can't use the water, and they just go, well, there's the solution. Please go and investigate that, and push from that point of view. I've seen sites that get closed down over Australia Day, over Easter, over Anzac, all because there's a blue-green algae bloom. The water's toxic. Please stay away from this tourist area in this lake. And they're going, that's $900,000 for that weekend we lost, and there's another $500,000 for the weekend for that, for the community money coming in and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I reckon I could fix that for $70, $80, $90, $100,000 for the year. And but we can't get in there because various authorities say, you can't treat this water, it's our water, stay away. And so that's a frustration. But we just have to respect that that's what they'll do or what they want.
But you do have clients. You do have people. Who are they now? Who are those clients now?
Bundaberg Regional Council, that we're based in Bundaberg. We've recently moved up here. Unity Water in Sunshine Coast, Logan City Council, up north, Townsville City Council. There's some aquaculture people up there. Water Corporation in WA, they do all of WA for wastewater. Goulburn Valley Water. So there's little pockets where we've done things, and then they present the good thing about utilities is they have these little get-togethers locally, and they say what worked for you, and we often get a mention, and then we pick up another client from there. But generally, we've been going to the industry conferences and saying this is what we do, and these are our before and afters, and they say, oh, we'll give it a trial and do that, and then move forward, and then move to another site and another site. So that's normally the way. And obviously with COVID, a lot of those industry conferences have disappeared or gone online. So it is a little bit harder.
Look, I feel your pain, and look, I believe we have a solution for those problems, and that it is all about creating educational content and distributing it consistently, constantly, all of the time. And look, that's an expensive exercise for some. So look, I do know there is a solution out there, and as long as you keep producing that content and distributing it, I'm sure that more and more people will wake up to the problem, and that there is a solution. And I hope that this video and podcast episode actually does help you. I think it's a fantastic cause. So well done, Simon.
And likewise. Cheers, mate.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, mate. How do people follow what you're doing? And I know you had a beautiful video shot up there in Bundaberg just recently. It really does articulate both the problem and the solution very well. So what's the website?
So it's Algae Enviro, so ALGAENVIRO, so just algaeenviro.com.au. We have a fairly inactive Twitter feed, and but otherwise just touch base with me on LinkedIn I'm on there daily. So Simon Tannock, PhD, and start a chat. More than happy to talk to anyone. I can I've managed to, I hope, not bore you, but I can bore the pants off anyone talking about algae for many hours quite happily. We're basically, you know, I think our drive is that we are a drop-in solution to a lot of problems. So you don't need massive amounts of engineering. If you've got a biological algal bloom growing in a site, biology obviously loves it. It's just a matter of let's put this in and steer biology back to biodiversity, health, and the outcomes that that treatment system was designed for. That's kind of why I think what we do is really, really exciting.
Excellent. Thanks once again, Simon. Really appreciate your time.
No worries. Thank you.
And thank you to all of you who watch and listen to our Proactive podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can also get it on the website at memedia.com.au, and of course YouTube. Look up Me Media there, and there's plenty of episodes for you to watch. Thanks once again to all of you who listen. It's your encouragement and your support, that surely by comments, that keeps this podcast going. And I absolutely love sharing great stories from purpose-led people like Simon on our Proactive podcast. Take care, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.